Ever since Colleen Hoover blew up on TikTok, I've wanted to make a video about her. But that video in question would require a lot of scripting and honestly, I didn't have the time. But when I found out that her books were outselling literal cheeses, the Bible, by the way, is or was the most best-selling book of all time, I realised that she's not going anywhere anytime soon. Jesus, matey, you've got some competition. This video isn't going to be a critique of any one of her books in particular, more of a kind of rounded view of her books in general, including the themes, critiques of her books, and critiques of literature in general, and also my thoughts of why I think they've got so popular. How did she get so popular? The short answer is TikTok. First of all, let's discuss the TikTok algorithm and how it can blast book content about a specific book in a matter of hours. Publishers Weekly has a better summary than I do, so I'm just going to read that one out for you. BookTok content reaches an extremely large audience. Videos with the #BookTok hashtag have racked up a combined 18 billion views. Once a book like It Ends With Us is recommended by influencers, TikTok algorithm ensures that it pops up on users' feeds without them even searching for it. As of this writing, videos with the hashtag It Ends With Us have a combined 73 million views. This article came out on the 23rd of September 2021. At the time of filming, January 2023, there will be a lot more. Seeing people reading a particular book and freaking out about how good it is makes people want to read that book, and thus sales boom. Why do people like her books? This is probably the question that I've seen asked the most in relation to Colleen Hoover. I've seen that people like her books because they are very easy to read and easy to get into, which is really good if you're someone that doesn't read that often. And/or there are really crazy twists that the reader did not see coming, which, you know, must admit, I do like books that do that. I've also seen that they are for people who maybe have not had a Wattpad or fanfiction.net phase. Judging by the number of ratings these books have on Goodreads, that's a lot of people. And technically I fall into this category as well because fanfiction has never really appealed to me. Mom, can we go to the bookstore? I want to buy a Colleen Hoover book. BookTok's reader base is generally young people. I'm not saying that younger readers can't have good taste in books. I mean, that is all completely subjective anyway. But when you haven't read a lot yet and you don't have things to compare books to, and also factor in maturity level as well, it makes sense that younger readers enjoy books that older or more experienced readers might deem trash or cringy. In addition, a lot of readers like reading books that explore themes and content they would never seek out in real life. For example, teacher-student relationships. Colleen Hoover's written a whole series about that trope. People like reading for escapism and curiosity. Technically, fantasy books fall into this sort of categorization because they are outside of the boundaries of reality, and as a fantasy reader myself, I do fall into this category. The more you know, right? According to someone called Susan Ostrov-Weiser, the romance genre, I've seen some discourse online on whether her book should even be classed as romance, more on that later, acts as a model of reality. It is separated from actual life and is characterized as being for entertainment value or escape, as I have just said. However, there was no true escape from fiction when it comes to romance. Weiser wrote that traditional narratives are threaded into our experience. Fiction becomes very real to us as we try to live with and through them, while reality becomes fictionalized. Fictionalized romance provides individuals with a mechanism of making sense of their feelings and connections through a medium that denotes those feelings as being both ordinary and universal. If you thought I wrote all of that, you were very mistaken. Themes. So let's cover the most prevalent themes of her books. There always seems to be an absent or terrible father. Her books always center abusive relationships. More specifically, books that go on to romanticize the abuse because the abuser in question, a lot of the time, doesn't actually hit or assault the victim, and that's okay, apparently. There's nuance to this, right? You can emotionally manipulate someone, and that's still abuse, even if there's no physical violence inflicted onto them. The student-teacher relationship also crops up as an example because an older man is taking advantage of a high school student's naivety. Yeah, she's 18, but she's still in school. It's still literally illegal. Abuse isn't just physical violence. It takes a lot of forms and can be just as damaging to a person's psyche as injuries. There also always seems to be a tragic accident. There's insta-love. We've had an interesting relationship with that on this channel. Someone is pregnant, someone has or dies from a disease, typically cancer. I've also seen some criticism that her books veer towards the misogynistic lane. Women in her books, according to A Clockwork Reader's Colleen Hoover reading vlog, which you should all go and watch, by the way, it is a very good time, tend to only be portrayed as good if they don't outshine their husbands, they want children, and are submissive and docile. I don't know about you, but it's giving very 1800s societal ideals. You do know we're in the 2000s, right, Colleen? Colleen? Alright, a little interjection, because I didn't know which category to put this in. I've been watching many a video about Colleen Hoover to research for this video, and I ran into a comments thread about someone who works in a bookstore, and the fact that literal 11/12-year-olds have been trying to buy her books because they've seen them be recommended on TikTok. But I cannot tell you how many times my co-workers have had to advise parents of like 12 years old about the contents of these books because their kids are begging for them. They are marketed as romance, i.e. adult, so probably has adult word I can't say because YouTube will get annoyed at me, content on it. But people assume that because it's on TikTok it must be appropriate for children. I don't think at all that book reading should be policed. I'm the type of person who was reading John Green novels at like age 11 because I wanted to be cool and grown up by reading young adults, but these books have some tough, grown-up themes and content in them that you really should not be putting in front of children, especially as young as what? Like the last year of primary school in some cases? If this doesn't strengthen the need for content warnings at the start of a book, so parents can check to see if it's suitable for their children, I don't know what will. Sometimes blurbs on the back of like really dark books can be surprisingly tame, okay? If you're wondering why anyone can be so ignorant and assume that everything seen online is fine, this comment does a great job at summing it all up, so I will read it out for you. The thing is that BookTok recommendations are, if I had to estimate, maybe 65% young adult and 35% adult, primarily romance and sci-fi fantasy. You have parents who see their 12-year-olds reading, I don't know, the Lunar Chronicles of the Selection, firmly YA, nothing that you wouldn't find in a Marvel movie, tamer than that even, and probably loads of other reasonably appropriate YA novels because they or their friends saw it on TikTok. So when the kid says TikTok says that Colleen Hoover's good, the parents will probably assume it's YA and therefore be reasonably appropriate for a middle schooler, because everything else that they're aware of anyway from TikTok has been as well. The kids themselves may not even realize that they're picking up an adult romance book, depending on how they got the recommendation. We've had at least a couple of parents get mad at us over this, and frankly, it's ridiculous. If I got something that was not from the kids' teen section when I was a kid, my parents at least glanced over the summaries to make sure they weren't grossly inappropriate before buying them. You can't not monitor what your kid is reading and then get mad at us when you buy it for them without checking it out first. Just let people like what they like. The problems of not allowing critique. People get rather defensive when you say that you don't like their favourite books, and that's all fine and good. But at the same time, everyone is entitled to their opinions, and they're just books, it's not that deep. Wait a minute, that's what my mum says when she tries to get me to get rid of my book collection. Scratch that. The point still stands though. There's been a wave of what I would call anti-intellectualism on the internet over the past few years, where some select individuals get really annoyed at people who critique and maybe even make fun of books. Just let people like what they like, etc. In my mind, people shouldn't be shamed or told off for liking a certain thing unless it's like on the other side of the universe of how problematic and concerning it is. But there also should and needs to be a place for critique. It's quite a slippery slope, this conversation. It can actually be pretty dangerous to not allow critique, especially if you're dealing with something like an abusive relationship. A situation that anyone can find themselves in, no matter who they are and what their personality is. If we're not calling these relationships problematic, teenagers, who are the most impressionable of us and the ones that seem to be heavily reading these books, are more likely to think that these relationships are okay, even normal. And so if they find themselves in a potentially abusive relationship, they're not going to recognize the signs and they're not going to realize that the situation they're in is, to put it quite simply, really dodgy. The longer you're in that toxic setting, the harder it is to get out. And with Colleen Hoover books, it's important to point out that pursuing these relationships in real life is not something to be encouraged at all. You can enjoy books about abusive relationships, but they should never be marketed as romance.